We're at a very unique time in our nation. I want to say the world, but it seems at this particular moment, 2025, October, the world really isn't a concern, and it seems that the United States has got a whole lot of issues going on that we've never really had to deal with before. And it's interesting, I'm at a dilemma as far as my program is concerned. I've been on the air for 20 years now, and I try to focus primarily on how the individual can be well, whether it's health. I'll be 67 next month in 2025, November. I'm in pretty good shape. I eat right, I exercise. Between the years of 50 and 60, those 10 years, I earned an associate degree, a bachelor's degree, and a master's degree, MBA. And I'm doing well in every aspect of life, and I try to share that because early in my life, in the early years, from the time I joined the military at 17 years old, and throughout the next 11 years of my life, I lived a very destructive life. Having fun and not realizing how destructive it was at the time, and then having an epiphany and making an about face and dropping all of the bad habits, redefining me, and went on then to build a bigger and better life, which in comparison to what I was about, it's amazing now. And so I try to share self-help and motivation and encouragement, not through theory, but through experience, in that if I can do it, anybody can do it. And many of you have seen me over the years, even until recently, posting positive things. And my underlying reality is that if I can do it, anybody can do it. I was the least disciplined. I was the most self-destructive. I was making all the wrong moves, and my life was showing it. I always worked, I always had a good job, but the personal life that I felt was focused on fun was simply destroying, the potential, the future potential. And fortunately, my eyes were opened at age 28, young enough to turn things around, And so this is what I spend most of my time speaking about on the cable program, on social media, and on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and all. But I can't really go there now because we're faced. It's almost like the kindergarten part. The stuff I've been talking about is as you get older and cognizant of life and the effect that you could have on your own personal life. But the way this country is right now, the politics and the social disarray, we're not even ready for self-help. We got to figure out the basics. I remember years ago when my daughter was in the 11th grade in high school. She's a junior now in college. But when she was in high school, her and her classmates were going to St. Thomas to live on a boat for 2 weeks. And she wanted her scuba certification. And she needed a dive partner to train with to become certified. And so it was just before my 63rd birthday. And shoot, I volunteered, so I'm scuba certified too, But what's very interesting, before we could begin learning the art of scuba diving and all of the things that go with it, the training and insight and understanding and knowledge you have to be a safe and certified scuba diver, we had to do 10 laps, just regular swimming around the swimming pool. It's very interesting. Now me, I was younger. I was trained to swim at a young age. I was on a swimming team when I was about 12 years old or so. So I could swim. But it was very important that we knew how to swim. Now what's very interesting is that scuba diving has nothing to do with regular swimming. There's nothing to do with how you ordinarily swim. But the point was that in case you ever got in trouble and you're in an ocean or in a big large body of water, and you ran out of air, out of your tanks or whatever, you had to be able to swim to get to somewhere of safety. So it was important that before we learned how to scuba dive, they had to ensure that we knew how to swim. It was the basic knowledge, the basic understanding. And what I'm suggesting is that that's where we are in our history right now. It's almost like we're not ready for perfection because we're failing at the basics. We can't even discern the difference between good and evil. And it's amazing to me. It's amazing how we can sign ourselves on. This is religious people as well, who are Christians who are supposed to be embracing Jesus and the love of Jesus and the love and care for strangers and people who are not like you and all this stuff, man. And our nation has just gone crazy. And what's very interesting is that to use a biblical verse in the book of Galatians, the 6th chapter, the 7th verse, it reads, be not deceived. God is not mocked. Whatsoever a man sows, that he will also reap. Chickens coming home to roost. Karma. However you want to look at it. We embrace those phrases and we use them all the time and we seem to believe them, but we only believe them when they're applying to someone else and it's something bad that's going to happen to them. We hardly ever see that it applies to us. It's very important for us to be able to introspect and recognizing that we are the ones. We cannot be the ones that attach ourselves to evil. We cannot be the ones that attach ourselves to oppression. But we so easily do. And again, it's the church folks that are the ones that are amazing me. It seems like they're the biggest perpetrators of this evil, of this oppression. And we have to recognize that what goes around does come around, and we're seeing it in our nation today. We might be applauding, certain folks going out in masks, and yanking people up off the street. But come on now, really? Aren't we used to seeing these videos from like the Middle East or like Lebanon or Iraq or Afghanistan, people being kidnapped right off the street by masked men and taken into custody, even reminiscent of Adolf Hitler and his brown shirts, I'm just suggesting that we have just so easily bought into what we once saw was evil and we want to attribute it to other nations. The whole anti-immigrant thing. And this is not a political message, it's a moral message. Because I can look at the political left and the political right and see both extremes are like crazy. I am a minister, in the Christian religion. I have been for over 30 years now. I consider myself a progressive liberal conservative. Because I don't do anything, but I try not to condemn other folks for what they choose to do. Not that I validate what other folks are choosing to do, but I feel and I believe that they have to walk out their own journey, recognizing there is a thing called reaping what you sow. And so if this is what you choose to be, this is how you choose your life, recognize the ramifications, and if you're okay with it, you're okay with it. Yeah, but for me, as I walk this walk, and I was speaking to a very well-known pastor today I met for lunch. And I was sharing that, reminding, because we had discussions before about how I had been raised in the church. And then at 17, when I joined the military, I became an atheist. Not an angry atheist, just an atheist that knew there was no deity. And then when I was 28, I had this epiphany. And that's when my life changed, okay? And I was at home, I wasn't in church, anything like that. I just realized. And what I suggested was that was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it's easier, I believe, for an individual to have been an atheist and then to have his eyes opened and then walk right and be determined to make the right moves, versus someone who was always in church and never left and always believed and began sliding and gravitating toward things that aren't quite moral. Because for me, It's the deity, it's the divine that I embrace, not of a particular religion, but the reality that we all emanate from that same source, and that source is real for me. And so this is how I live. This is how I live my life. I can't intentionally do anybody wrong. I have to have mercy on folks even when they do me wrong. And that was way different than Marty it used to be, believe me. And so it's a different walk when you're a true believer. Loving folks sounds so corny, but really, really caring for people. Not allowing myself to be taken advantage of, but to really honestly be concerned for other people even when they seemingly don't deserve it, okay? This is a believer. This is the heart of a believer. And so that's the way I walk, that's the way I live my life, even as far as, believing in the healing aspect, of a walk as a believer, which I have experienced so many times. And so I'm asked sometimes, even by my family, even by my wife, go to the hospital, and I'm like, if God doesn't exist, what does it matter anyway? And so, but I don't walk by faith with no works. I take care of myself. I exercise every day. I eat right every day. So I try to trust the faith with works. But it's like if God exists, then I'm in His hands. Now I'm not ridiculous about it. I used to have these muscle spasms where I couldn't fix those myself. But the regular things about me, even as a man who's going to be 67 in about a month or so, I can cure myself by simply eating healthy, exercising, and getting enough sleep, okay? But still, either God is or God isn't. And if God is, and again, I'm a Christian minister, but I think beyond the Christian religion, that happens to be the religion I was a part of growing up. That was what I knew when my epiphany came, but my reality is I've walked this thing out over the past 40 years almost, 39 years, is that God, Allah, Yahweh, Krishna, supersedes, is greater than the religions which we have created in our attempt to understand and define deity. And so that's what I embraced. That's who I embrace as God, okay? That is the God over all humanity. That is the God that loves all humanity. That is the God that no human being is cursed. That is the God that understands that we all are born into sin. We all continue in sin. And if not for the grace and acceptance of God, none of us would be well in the eyes of God. Okay, so that's the humility I walk in, and even the forgiveness and the grace that I offer other folks who are obviously screwing up, right in front of my face, is that how many times that I have been saved from the screw ups, not exposed by the screw ups. So I have to, I can't, in all humility, I have to accept everyone, even those who seem not to be doing right at the time, because that was once me. Okay, and I just didn't get jammed up. And so I have a very unique feeling about the religion, that we are all related to each other. So when we are, and I don't believe there are any borders as far as a believer is concerned. So when we have immigrants that are fleeing oppression, immigrants that are fleeing treachery and dangers and criminal activity, and folks in our community wish to turn them away, I can't accept that. I can't go for that. And I can't see, even from a biblical perspective, how any believer could. And so, I didn't know if this particular program was going to be my spiritual program or my secular program, but it looks like it's morphing into my spiritual program. Okay? So we as believers, I think we have an opportunity here. This is almost like a biblical story, where we had a church, and I say a church, I mean the church, that we base our beliefs on, that was built on corruption. And all we're seeing today is just a manifestation of that grown church, or the children of the corruption that are just as corrupt. Yeah. Now see, I think that when we look back at our history, even the nations that we have been at odds with, we see leaders that have exhibited tendencies toward their population that have been heinous, like Hitler. Okay, we have leaders like Mussolini. You know, we have Stalin. We have the Hungarian guy in more recent years, the late 60s or 70s. I can't remember his name, but he and his wife were killed by the population. But the point I'm making is as harsh as they were, as heinous as they were to the people, they lived the life, a good life for a while, but it caught up with them because we do reap what we sow. Okay, they never prospered forever. They came to their end, and so did their families. And I think what we have to realize, and I guess we can take this down, we're going to speak on it from a national level, but we can embrace it as an individual level as well, that we may not be reaping in the exact same way that we are sowing. Okay? I was speaking to a gentleman the other day, and he was asking me, there was these child murders in Georgia. This guy's Wayne Williams, I think was his name. And he was asking me if I thought he was guilty of those crimes. This was just yesterday, as a matter of fact. And my response to him was, I don't know. Maybe not. But we do reap what we sow, so we might get jammed up for something we didn't do, and we might really be suffering and feel it's unfair because we know we didn't do that, but are we just receiving the recompense for something else that we did, but just through this venue over here, okay? So I'm suggesting that as believers and just regular human beings who believe in karma, who believe that what goes around comes around, who believe that chickens do come home to roost, make sure that we don't attach ourselves to something that is evil, something that is harsh to humanity. I was speaking to a gentleman recently, I guess about Assata Shakur, the revolutionary, the black revolutionary from the 70s, who allegedly killed a policeman and then fled to Cuba, where she was in exile, but they didn't have extradition with the United States, so she was able to live out her life there. She just passed away recently. And this gentleman was sharing with me that and he was a Puerto Rican living in England, that she was a criminal, that she was a revolutionary, a terrorist, that had killed a policeman, and he didn't have any sympathy for her. And what I shared with her was the history of his own Puerto Rico, and striving for independence away from the United States, you know, and participating in certain terrorist activities to free themselves, which of course didn't work. And he couldn't see the correlation. And he was beginning to disparage the nation, the Puerto Rico today because of its leadership. And what I suggested to him, that he had forgotten the history of the United States in its challenging of the rule of England, where the colonists were domestic terrorists, fighting an insurrection against colonial rule. And so this nation was built on that same premise. And so I was sharing with the gentleman, as he was disparaging Miss Shakur, is that you cannot go to the oppressor and get a clear understanding of exactly what truth is, but you must go to the oppressed. And that's where truth lies, because the oppressed have no other reason. They have no other motivation other than to cry out for help from what it is exactly that they're facing, okay? And so what I'm suggesting is that it's a good rule of thumb then, is for good people, for good moral people, rather than listen to the excuses and the rhetoric of those who are benefiting from the conflict. Listen to the cries of the oppressed, because that's probably where you're going to find more truth, okay? And the reason I'm so strongly suggesting it is because we are directly receiving recompense for what we sow, or the organizations that we attach ourselves to, and what they're due to say. We're going to be sowing what we're going to be reaping what they're reaping, is all I'm saying. And life is tough enough. And I'm back to my regular message, we all can be well individually, but first and foremost, we really need to check our affiliations and those people we have sympathies for, and those people that we are abhorring, because we don't want to be caught abhorring the wrong people, be heartless to the wrong people. For real. Now I struggle too. I struggle sometimes, trying to do right at the same time not being and taking advantage of. I understand that. Just today I was coming from the grocery store, and there was this guy out there holding a sign asking for money, right? And he was like 3 times bigger than me. I'm like, you must be. This is what I was thinking. You're eating something, right? So I need to see a skinny person holding the sign. I'd be more inclined to give. But so I don't want to be taken advantage of either. But on a large scale, we really have to be objectively looking at history and looking at really what's going on in these nations. And with the internet, there was no excuse for us not to know what's going on. There's no excuse for anybody to simply limit themselves to one particular news organization that is leaning toward a particular political party. I don't care which political party it is, because what you're going to get is biased news from both sides. You need to find the truth, okay? But one of the quickest and easiest truths to be able to glean is by going to the people who are being oppressed. All throughout history, all of the nations, some of those nations in Chile and everywhere, El Salvador and all of these nations, some of the governments and of course, like Iraq and some of the nations over there, and now in the United States, where the people are suffering terribly. Those are the people that are suffering are the people who are correct. And I can just put it plainly there without beating around the bush. People in this nation who are being yanked off of the streets, they're not the wrong ones. The people who are doing the yanking are the wrong ones, okay? Because there's a way about doing things that has separated our nation from other nations. That's kept us afloat. So you might say, well, how does it keep us afloat, Martin? Let's get back to the scuba diving again. Scuba diving, the key to scuba diving is maintaining a balance. Not going up, not going down unless you want to, but trying to stay right in the middle so you're not being up or down, okay? And so I correlate that then to this whole thing about sowing and reaping. It says all things. That's what we understand, whatever you do. So that's not just bad, it's good as well. And see, the United States, as heinous as this country has been in its treatment of the Native Americans and its treatment of the Africans, it has always maintained somewhat of a balance, because our nation has always been involved in some sort of charity. So as heinous as we may be over here, we've been charitable over here and been keeping us on kind of an up and down, kind of a semi-balanced state, so we're not simply destroying ourselves. But lately, our nation has been ridding itself of even the charitable parts, okay? Taking away from this, taking away from that. And I want to share with you this, even the immigrants that have come to this nation. Over the years, a lot of immigrants have come to this nation. Even the ones over the southern border. And what I want to share is not persecuting these folks. And there being jobs for these folks to tend to the farms. There are many jobs that the incoming immigrants could do, whatever their status was, and it was benefiting this nation. And we're finding this out now. The farmers are finding it as they don't have any workers, and so who's going to tend to their crops? They're finding that out. And so there was that symbiotic relationship. There was that reaping and sowing. So no matter what negatives this nation actually had its hand in doing, which have been a lot, there's always been sort of a balance there, because we've always been good, even with so-called, illegal immigrants. Immigrants here without the proper paperwork and all, still finding food for them, finding work for them, work that actually fed their families, fed their children, fed their babies, and actually provided the revenue for the farms that needed these workers. I mean, everyone was benefiting. But as you begin to cut out the charity, cut out the good works, you're not left with a balance to balance off the evil that this nation has been a part of. Every nation has evil. Every human being has evil. And I think I share, you understand where I'm going. Now let me just kind of end this program and just take that whole concept then and apply it to our lives as human beings, okay? We are not really ethical people as human beings. Not totally. I don't care if you're a believer or not, if you're a religion or not, whether you're a Jew, whether you're a Muslim, whether you're a Hindu, whether you're a Christian, whether you're just an atheist, an agnostic, or whatever you are. None of us are righteous, okay? And I'm not even speaking from righteous from a religious sense. I'm speaking from righteous from an ethical sense, that who never lies, who never deceives, who never says or does something that is not really right. I think we all do, for whatever reasons. And I'm suggesting is that we have to make sure and keep our hand doing things that are good, to balance off, to offset that evil. Because the moment we start cutting off the good, it's like you got, say you're washing your hands in like warm water and it feels real good. Because you have the right mixture of hot and you have the right mixture of cold water coming in. But if you shut off the cold, you're going to scald your hands. If you shut off the hot, you're going to freeze your hands. You need that mix. And that mix is that balance of grace and mercy that we get to survive in, that we get to operate in, because we are kind of bad as human beings. But we offset that by our charity, by our good works. And as we begin, as this nation is, cutting off our good works, not my tax dollars, and all that stuff, man. It's like, I think sometimes we just fall into the politician's trap. Okay? And some of the religious leaders as well. Because see, the religious leaders have found how easy it is to manipulate its parishioners. Okay, you're flying around in Gulfstream jets, living in 20,000 square foot mansions and living the life and all that stuff because parishioners are giving it and the government's giving you a tax exempt status and you have good attorneys to make sure everything is in the right category. Come on now. This is what religious folks have been doing. Politicians have been doing it too in their own way, just pimping the people for their own enrichment. And then when you get the religious leaders hooking up with the politicians, it's like, man, they're just manipulating the people and their gullibleness to the point of moving people. I don't know, man. We're just in a bad spot. And so I want to just close this program then, just imploring you to begin to search your heart and search the goodness of your heart, because I believe we all have that goodness within us. And then just ask yourself, are you really doing right? I mean, I was talking to this one guy, and he was like a political guy. Not a politician, but really now, especially the past 10 years into the politics and all. And he was so adamant and ragging on those immigrants coming over the border. I could just take a gun down there and just start shooting them. And this was a good guy. But something just got a hold of his brain. And I said, look, man, have you ever been to the border? No. I said, has anyone that's ever come over the border actually affected you in your life in any way? No. Then what are you mad about? For real. I'm serious, man. I mean, I don't know the intricacies of government and the monies and how they do what they do. But if you could send $8 billion to Israel, to help them kill people, in their own region, I mean, how can we justify withholding what could be a significant amount of money to help people who are actually in need? Okay? I'm just saying. And you can probably do this better than me. Just really think about it. You know, I just sat there. Sometimes I take notes before my program. You know, what am I going to talk about? And I have like 8 or 9 bullet points about a particular topic. But I sat down here blank today, man. Because this is a tough one. We're in a particular place in this world where we have been the world leader since World War II and probably World War I around that time. And now it's like this nation is like the laughing stock of the world. Because the world sees what half of this nation sees, that our leadership is inept and not really competent. It's like the emperors with the clothes, you know. The emperor's walking around naked and everybody's acting like he's wearing clothes. We all should know better than this. The whole world knows we know. And it's hard to trust which side of the political spectrum to come on. Because the reality is, no matter what's going on in our nation, no matter how we're suffering, the Republican Democrat politicians are all pretty much doing financially well. So they might get mad. So it's very important for us to watch real carefully what's going on. And see, I don't consider myself a Democrat or a Republican, okay? Because I'm a black man in America until things are totally right. 100%. I'm just being used for my vote. Okay, so sometimes there will be conservative things that might, well, I don't know, recently, the conservative party's gotten kind of on steroids and everything, but I'm saying you can look at both parties and find things that you kind of agree with and things that you don't. But never fall for seeing what is evil as being good as it pertains to your fellow human beings, okay? We can go back and forth about the money and whether old people really need Medicare or not, or whether people that haven't managed their finances can survive if their hospital bills are quadrupled, you know. You know, sometimes it takes that pressure in order to make change, you know, and maybe it's going to be that pressure on the people big time to recognize that they cannot survive based on, you know, what our current leadership is doing. But in the meantime, as individuals, just try as yourself, just to do what's right, do the right thing, be right, be good, and take care of your health, eat right, educate yourself. And outside of a particular political news organization on either side of the spectrum. Al Jazeera is a real good news network to find truth, okay? And probably something in Ireland or something, you know, certain nations that are, you can probably get good information from them that don't have a bias, you know. But anyway, I guess I've rambled because I didn't have bullet points today. I was just kind of, you know, out of it. I just didn't know what to do. Because we're just in a place where of almost hopelessness if we don't turn around. And so what point is the self-help? Nobody wants to hear self-help right now. Nobody's really I am concerned. I'm 67 years old. I will be in a month. I need to be able to take care of myself. I'm not trying to go out like that, feet first, anytime soon. You know, but for the rest of the United States right now, we just need to get our focus back on where it's supposed to be. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. And so we loving our neighbor and ourselves, and we can start taking care of ourselves again. But first, we're going to have to love our neighbor. Because I think it was when Jesus was asked, you know, what the greatest commandment, his response was, love God with all of your heart. And he said the second greatest commandment, second only to loving God, is to love your neighbor as you love yourself. Who is my neighbor? And that's when Jesus gave the story of the Good Samaritan who helped a man who hated him. And Jesus said, be like that man. So if we then are instructed to help someone who hates us, then who are we even supposed to be hating? Okay? If we're even supposed to help people that hate us, there's no one left for me to hate. And Jesus said, if you can do these two things, you're fine. He said, in this rest all the laws and the prophets. But anyway, I'll leave you with that. I do want to thank you once again for joining me for another perspective. And I want to invite you to join me again. You take care.